Weiji is an incipient moment, a crucial moment, when something begins or changes. All these dimensions of Weiji or crisis certainly characterize our times, especially in relationship to changing climate, which will last 1,000 years. Even if we stop putting CO2 into the environment today, the effects and the weather changes that have happened will stay for 1,000 years. So it seems to me it's not really a question of what the Chinese character does or doesn't mean. What really matters is how we react to the biggest crisis facing humanity. I'd like to suggest, perhaps with the naive optimism of my young Chinese students I taught, that we recast the climate crisis as a genuine opportunity, an opportunity to radically transform society, to create a society that lives more in harmony with its surrounding ecology, rather than pushing it to the breaking point. So in this sense, I'd like to look at the climate crisis both as a possible dire future for humanity, but also as an opportunity for us to respond and recreate society fundamentally so that we don't have an economy that's changing the weather. You know, think about that. Our economy is changing the weather. and the economy is incapable of doing anything to change that. So the climate crisis is really an indictment of our society, our very social, political, and economic structure. In order to solve this crisis, we have to remake society along ecological and democratic lines. In many ways, this is a crisis that anarchists and social ecologists have predicted for years. It offers us the opportunity to redo our transportation models, our food production, the way we generate energy, how we make things, the way we make political decisions, how the U.S. relates to the rest of the world. So it really is a great opportunity. It couldn't be better for us to start a social movement to recreate society, because if we don't, humanity is going to live in a very different world. Things are going to get very bad. Expecting the market to solve the crisis that it created by buying and selling the right to pollute, the so-called cap and trade, is as absurd and ineffective a model as it sounds like. Expecting capitalism to solve the climate crisis is like expecting a cancer to solve the very health crisis its presence has provoked. The only solution cancer can offer is death. Ultimately, all capitalism has to offer is the same. We don't have much time, but I'd like to suggest some places we can begin to turn things in our direction. Instead of offering grand visions of insurrection and revolution, which I'm all for, I'd like to present the initial steps we need to take to get to a place where we can seriously talk about revolution. It's not just an abstraction, but there's very concrete things we can do. So one of the most important places I think to start in terms of organizing and changing the world is in forming study groups. Study groups offer a place where you can get together with others, examine our circumstances, and think about solutions. To form a study group, think of 3 or 5 people you know and trust, and invite them to study together. You can choose a topic, the climate crisis or the economic crisis, and rotate facilitation. You decide if you want to meet every week or every 2 weeks. And choose readings that you'll discuss each time you come together. This is a good way to develop collective understandings of an issue while helping your group develop common politics. Eventually, after you all get to know each other and feel confident about your collective understandings, your group can develop into a political collective or an affinity group, which can move from examining issues to actually organizing around them. There's a study group forming about Wobblies and Zapatistas that meets October 12th at In Other Words bookstore. And there's the Parasol Climate Change Study Group, which will be doing a presentation tomorrow at 9 a.m. And the Parasol group, for instance, we started meeting last April, and we just put out a call that we wanted to study the climate crisis and its relationship to capitalism from a radical perspective in April. And we've been meeting every 2 weeks initially, and now every week, getting ready for our presentation tomorrow. And so we've gone from being a group of people that knew each other as acquaintances doing political work to being a group that's putting out a presentation at a conference tomorrow. So those are the kinds of things you can develop into. Now that we've started going into more educational work, we're starting to develop more into like a political collective that will start doing political organizing. And political collectives can engage in educational work like these public forums and workshops, but you can also do local, national, and international work on local, national, and international issues. Another thing that once you form a political collective, You can hook up with other collectives in regional and continental federations. Groups like the Northeast Federation of Anarchist Communists, or NEFAC, Bring the Ruckus, groups like this. This allows your group to coordinate across a larger area, engaging in campaigns in several cities and locations at once. You also benefit from engaging in political and strategic discussions with a large group of people from various backgrounds, facing a variety of local conditions. Your politics will benefit from this type of exposure and this kind of interaction with other collectives. I was involved in a political collective called AWOL in Minneapolis for 3 years. We met every week, and we sent delegates to Anti-Racist Action and TCAF and other organizations in Minneapolis and did a lot of organizing. AWOL had a variety of meetings. It was an acronym. Sometimes it was Anarchists Without Lawyers, Anarchists with Outlawing Leaflets, The World of Life, depending on our mood, our American way of life. But we had a lot of fun, and we got a lot done in Minneapolis, just being a political collective, working with Ravel and other groups in Minneapolis. I think right now what is most important is education, things like this conference. It's an essential first step in creating the type of social movement which will be necessary to create the kind of change that we need. The movement against the arms race in the early 1980s began with educational campaigns. They had large public forums and debates. They did presentations and workshops. They wrote articles, produced pamphlets, and all this kind of educational work led eventually to a mass movement, which resulted in 100,000 people marching in Chicago in 1982 and 1 million people in New York City in 1982. So starting with study groups and moving up to political collectives, forming revolutionary organizations, and doing large-scale educational campaigns, we can create the basis for creating social movements. We need a mass-based social movement for a new society in response to this society that's being so dominated by capitalism that it's changing the weather. It doesn't seem to be able to stop. To think that capitalism or the state's going to solve this crisis is like thinking they're going to introduce universal health care. It's just not going to happen. We need to develop either a social movement organized around climate change or a movement focused on other issues, of which solving the climate crisis and aid to grow part. These social movements will have to result in insurrection and revolution in order to fundamentally restructure society. Only this will solve the climate crisis. I think other necessary components, which I don't have time to get into, but I'd like to touch on to get to the point where we can really solve this climate crisis and transform society, is doing things like creating counter-institutions, places like the Red and Black Cafe, to prefigure working-along institutions, to give people experience of what it's like to work without a boss. Also doing workplace organizing, changing things in the place where you spend most of your day. I think the work of the IWW along these lines is very helpful. They're very good organizers. These types of projects build the new society in the shell of the old and give us practice in running our own lives rather than relying on the state or bosses. The struggle against racism and sexism, which has been the historic downfall of the white left, must play an essential role in our political analysis and practice. And we have to start now. We have to learn how to run our lives in a directly democratic fashion, to do the kind of prefiguration that Cindy was talking about, while changing people's minds and creating the social momentum to create a counter-hegemonic challenge before it's too late. By engaging in workplace organizing, community organizing, creating counter-institutions and revolutionary organizations, forming study groups and political collectives, we're transforming ourselves and the parts of society we're a part of into the type that we want to live in. And we have to force the issue. Many in the anarchist scene seem to think that some big revolution will just happen someday. It's similar to the reform-mindedness of the social democrats in the early 20th century, who thought that capitalism would collapse from its own internal contradictions. They just said, well, we just have to wait, and eventually capitalism will collapse. It's been 100 years since they thought that, and here we are, with capitalism still existing. So it's really going to take us getting ourselves organized and acting collectively to bring about the type of society that we and our children and grandchildren will want to live in.